We did it, guys. We're live. We're live. There's audio, and we tweeted, and we are
And
just
I'm going to count it as a win because I'm looking at the stream right now, and it's clear that the frame rate is better than it already has been. So, despite the fact that we've been spending 40 minutes troubleshooting Discord and OBS, we finally arrived at a result that's actually better. So, I'm going to count it as a win.
yeah. So good news. I have a meeting at 1, which I can just send a message and say I'm going to be a little bit late. So we're just gonna. No, my bad. I have a while. We can do this for an hour and a half. I don't know what time is anymore. It's an illusion.
So, I will introduce our guest because
No.
I
Oh,
imagine,
want to do intros? Let's do
yeah, we
intros.
should probably do that. We
You
should
got
probably
it,
do
Matt.
that.
You got it. Sorry, I'm
We've been
totally on
waxing
it.
philosophic on how time is meaningless,
Yeah, here.
and
I'm gonna.
and here we've neglected the fact that there's a gentleman on the call that's literally living in the future.
Yeah, he is from the future.
Wow, gentleman as well. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Well, I assume that's what you call everybody
Mm.
with the
So,
top hat and the
welcome
monocle.
to NRE.live. It's the NRE Labs weekly stream with hosts myself, Cloud Toad, and Mirden Matt. I am Derek Winkworth, otherwise known as Cloud Toad on Twitter. You can follow me there. Um, and my co-host is Matt Oswald, otherwise known as Mirden, Mierdin. You can also follow on Twitter. And this is our weekly show about NRE Labs, which you can visit at labs.networkreliability.engineering, all lowercase. And it's a fun and easy way with no marketing wall that you can go and learn about automation topics. It's geared. The audience for this is it's geared towards network engineers. So if you're a network engineer and this is something automation is something you'd like to learn about, then this website is for you. And we do this stream, which is about NRE Labs every single week. We cover different issues. We have different guests, etc., etc. And this week we have David G, who's all the way on the other side of the pond in the UK, and he's done some pretty interesting things. So let's just jump right into it. Dave, what do you got for us
Hey,
today?
what have I got? What I haven't got? Oh, I've got everything for you guys. So Terraform on Junos or for Junos. I think this is relatively uncharted for networking as we know it today. This isn't a control thing. This isn't a build it, destroy it, water and feed it thing. We can use Terraform in some really, really cool ways for traditional networking, and a little bit on the NRE UK meetup as well. So we've got some interesting things going on.
Oh, when is
Maybe.
that? When is the NRE
So
meeting?
second NRE meetup is the 18th of April in Burton-on-Trent, otherwise known as Beer Town.
Nice.
Yeah, so we've got 3 to 3.5 hours. We've got some guests coming along. I'll probably try and limit about 30 minutes worth of time to talk about something I built recently, not Terraform. We've got some guests coming along as well. So anybody else wants to come along, please come along. We've got unlimited tea and coffee, beer, chili and nachos as well with rice. So come and eat and come and drink.
Chili and
Chili.
nachos
Yeah.
in the UK.
And it's in an old church. So you can drink and eat beef chili in a church. It's cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's good. I guess you're protected against vampires and other hazards.
Well, it's called Confessions as well, so don't drink too much beer. It could go wrong.
Derek has forever ruined for me the image of what a vampire is. He showed me this horrendous movie that was hilarious. What is it called? I don't even remember the name of it.
What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a movie about vampires?
Yeah.
Yeah, kinda.
So
Hang on.
we have there's there's a company here who is really interested. They've hired some engineers and they're very interested in contributing to NRE Labs. And Matt flew out so that he and I could go meet them in person, and um, that's why he was here in Wisconsin, all the way from Portland, which is a 4-hour flight, 4.5 hour flight. And he decided, we decided when he was at my house to watch a movie, and it was called What We Do in the Shadows. So the guy who made Thor Ragnarok made this movie, and he's also in it. The guy who directed it, and it's a comedy about vampires in the modern age, and it's highly recommended. It's from New Zealand, which means it's good. New Zealand makes good comedies in general.
Wikipedia calls it a mockumentary, which I've never heard that term before. I'm gonna have to watch this now. You've done it.
It's like if Twilight, Thor Ragnarok, and The Office had a baby. That would be this movie.
That's an awesome baby.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome baby.
Perhaps.
So last week we didn't have audio, but this week we all have audio. But Matt sounds like he's talking. He lives in a garbage can.
Still?
Yeah, but we can hear you. We can understand your words. So
that is disappointing.
Just play to the character, Matt. You'll be fine. Be grouchy. It's good.
Okay.
All right then.
So what about? I guess let's start. I'm curious to see if we could dive into the specifics of what makes Terraform different, because it is very different from what most network automators might expect with something like an Ansible, which is a workflow kind of tool. Do this, then do that. Change this variable. Add these integers together. That kind of stuff. Let's before we dive into the integration that you've built with Junos, let's talk about what is the fundamental philosophical difference between Terraform and something else.
Honestly, I think it's all down to the fact that the engineer can let go. Instead of worrying about what the configuration looks like and how to mutate it to a point, we just ask the Terraform module for what we want. Give me a port, give me a VLAN, give me an interface, give me a BGP session. We still have to feed variables in, but Terraform takes care of not only the order of creation for things, which is pretty cool. We don't have to worry about kind of pesky switches for features. Yeah. He's back. Dude, I don't know what he's done. He's fixed it or didn't touch it. I don't know.
I'm sorry. Is it good now?
Yeah, you're good now. Yeah, it's like you open the window in your garbage can and then you get a gale force wind blows through and then you shut the window again.
It should be using this correct mic now.
Okay.
But anytime I turn the volume up past 50%, it does that. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So Terraform is all around the declarative aspects, which I think makes it a different beast. But I think one of the most beautiful things about Terraform is it takes care of the destruction as well. So it's a whole CRUD-friendly platform. So you take something like Ansible. How many people do you know that will also build the backout plan as opposed to the forward mutation as opposed to the reverse mutation? I don't know anybody that does that. People only worry about making one change to bring something up or turn something on. And the thing about Terraform is once you have you've defined your, let's say, Terraform configlets, or you've defined your resources, and you do a Terraform plan, well, the same plan can be used to remove all of the kind of ghosts of the past instead of having to then, as an engineer, figure out how to remove all this crap. And I think that's something that I really love about it, to be honest. And not only that,
that's one of the things that I got kind of addicted to. And for those that aren't familiar with Terraform, it definitely has much more of it has its roots in the cloud. So it's commonly used for describing network cloud resources and things like virtual machines in the cloud and VPCs, that kind of stuff. And I got really addicted when I first started using it because you can very easily create these things just using simple text files. Which, again, if you're using Ansible, you might say well, I can create those with an Ansible playbook. But the thing with Terraform is you don't have to talk. You don't have to. There's no time dimension to this. With Ansible, there's a time dimension. You have to go step by step by step by step. And for simple things, that's fine. But I think for very complicated setups, it becomes difficult to describe both what it is that you're trying to create and also how you try to create it. And I think what you're saying, David, is spot on. It's like it just totally takes a lot of that complexity of having to describe the how and just focusing on the what. And Terraform figures out the how. You just say, this is what I want to exist. And the cool thing about that, like I said, I got really addicted to this because the cool thing about that is you can create a whole bunch with just a single command, and then you can tear it all down with just a slightly different command.
It's awesome, right? It's
absolutely anything it knows about is just going to be like, cool, I'm going to blow this away. And I was like when we first started building NRE Labs, everything's built on top of Terraform, by the way, with the infrastructure behind NRE Labs. And I got really addicted to like constantly rebuilding stuff because I was trying different things and wanted to configure things differently, and I was learning. So it was just really fun to just like totally blow it away. And I think I tweeted this where it's like, can you imagine like even 5 years ago in the world where people were still doing things in the data center? If you could do something like what Terraform was doing, but in the physical world, like it's unheard of. This is unprecedented. To be able to destroy like 50 servers all at once.
It's awesome. It's funny you say that. I've kind of got a little bit addicted. So even when I'm kind of building things or POCs or whatever, I'm now finding ways to terraformize it. It's just like this is so easy. This is just cool. It makes life brilliantly easy. It's fun as well, actually. It's brought some joy back because it kind of works. It just works. It doesn't kind of go, well, I'm not going to do this today for whatever reason, or this version of Ansible slightly. You think, I don't know. It just feels a lot more. It feels nice. It feels stable. You don't have to worry about templating and all this kind of nonsense. And I'm learning more and more about it as well. I mean, in order to actually build this stuff, I've had to look at the source code quite heavily. And I spent like 2 or 3 weeks just poking and fiddling around with things. And certainly that side of it has took a lot of thought. And it's still by no means clear yet. I came across a bit of a gotcha last week in terms of deployment, which is something that's probably interesting to talk about. So I don't want to talk about JSnappy too much here because some of this is kind of related to that. But when you take Terraform and you want to do certain things, and you also want to test for certain things, you have to kind of step out of the box a little bit and think, how does a device view the world and not how do you view the world? I can't really describe this. So, for instance, let's talk about an access switch. Let's just talk about provisioning access ports. And you want to provision an access port. Well, how do you know when you've provisioned a port? Do you go, well, I've changed the description field, or I'll check that, I don't know, the interface is open, I'm seeing MAC addresses. What do you do with that? And so from a Terraform perspective, how does Terraform know it's provisioned a port? Is it just a simple readback from the control plane that says, hey, I'm done. Job's a good one. Walk away. Happy days. Go have a beer. And I've ended up thinking about the kind of like almost sidestepping the engineering psychology to try and make Terraform meet the middle ground. And what I mean by that is automation. This is going to get deep. I need beer. Coffee's not good enough. So why do we automate stuff? Well, we automate human gadgets and human levers. All right, not necessarily true with Junos. Junos is different, but we take, let's say, an average network operating system. What we're actually doing is we're automating the things that a human would otherwise do. If we didn't automate the human things, we're going to be programming it. So we'd probably switch over to P4 or OpenFlow or something. And I guess that the difference is with that is you have to kind of think about the world from the human perspective, even more so in the design phase, certainly. That's what I found anyway. But once you've cracked that bit, the using it is just joyful. You get that bit right, and it's just fantastic.
So you said it can both back things, you can provision things and back things out. So when you're writing support for something, like if you're creating a module that Terraform can use, do you have to provide both things? Like,
no.
But it's recommended. Cool. You can.
So what you have to do, there are some mandatory things to do when you're building the modules. And there are 4 functions. There is create, read, update, and delete. And the idea is that you have to fill in all 4 of those kind of like boilerplate methods, or they kind of are. You can build it in different ways, I guess, but I've built mine as methods on a struct. It's all written in Go, so yay, that's super, super nice. And I don't have to work in any other kind of less desirable language. I'm not going to mention any names. As long as you fill those fields in, then it's down to you as the operator to you kind of You build your plan, and then Terraform keeps a local state which should match up with the state of the downstream device, or I always kind of call it like the control plane. Bad audio, Matt. There we go, mended. Yeah. He's going to go and kill himself now, that's fine. No.
Don't click on things, Matt. Oh man, your audio is like way overblown.
Oh dear. We need like one of those text-to-speech things for Matt, so we can just type in the box, and then some ASCII voice comes along, is like, "Hey Dave, so Terraform."
Okay, so you can make CRUD then. You can make create, read, update, and delete methods, I suppose, and and then you can, all those can be called from the command line in Terraform. You provide a Terraform file for the right, for the input for the right, that has the input for the right method, and then it'll go and do whatever it is you're asking.
Yeah, and you can do some very simple to some very complex things. So Terraform builds a cyclic graph from all the dependencies. So is you could you can create an access port. Let's say you take the traditional. I've come to view this as like the 3-tier app. You take an access port, you take a VLAN, you take a layer 3 interface, bind that to the VLAN. Some of those things have to be done in a certain order. So you think, well, we kind of need to create the layer 3 interface first, and we need to create the VLAN, then we can bind the VLAN to the port. And as long as you reference variables in the Terraform files, Terraform builds a graph of what it thinks it needs to build first in order to satisfy the kind of directed dependency graph. And that's true for both the plan, and it's also true for the delete. You don't have to worry about that in the actual writing of the code. That's the core Terraform functionality. So providing you take care of the CRUD functions, Terraform just naturally takes care of the rest. It implicitly satisfies all of those kind of requirements.
Oh wow! So it must have a way of validating those things then as they're unfolding.
So there are a number of equivalent, I guess I'm going to call them tiebreakers, but there are a number of rules. So let's say you write a really bad function and for whatever reason it crashes out. Then what will happen is Terraform will try and leave it in a certain state. So there are rules around what it does with IDs. If something doesn't happen, it might update an ID, it might not update an ID. And I think half of the problem when I was first kind of playing around with the code was trying to figure out exactly what Terraform will do under certain situations. Don't really know if that kind of builds on that one or not. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the CRUD operations, providing that you write solid code that with some basic error checking and some handling in there, it's very hard to kind of screw it up once you've got your plan of attack in place in terms of how these things are supposed to work. I think the hardest problem I had was dealing with the connection to the southbound. So what do? Do you open the socket? Do you kill the socket? Do you leave it like half lazily closed? Do you pass around the same handler and all that kind of thing? Or do you find ways to batch updates together or sequentially update the southbound device? I mean, that was a bit of a brain challenge at one point.
Interesting. So the last time I saw a Terraform file, which wasn't that long ago, it looked an awful lot like YAML when I was looking at it, and of course Ansible looks like YAML. So I guess what is the primary difference between those two off the top of your head? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to send a message to Mitchell Hashimoto on Twitter and tell him that you think HCL looks like YAML.
He won't like that. Maybe we can invite him to the stream and get Mitchell to defend HCL.
It doesn't look like YAML to you?
Well, it's kind of more like... No, I'm not going to open that tin. That's not going to happen.
Curly braces. It takes me out
is curly braces, so
it takes me out of the mode.
Okay.
Do you want to see some HCL?
No, not now. I'm embarrassed.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Share it. Show us. Show us a little bit of Junos in HCL.
Okay. Let me try and find these. I'm trying to find the right screen. I've got millions of things open. What I've been doing for the record, by the way, as well, every time I do work on the provider, I'm also creating example resources in terms of how to use them, because one of my biggest gripes in life is just nothing's ever documented, nothing ever works. Right, let me do that. Okay, I'm going to try and do this share. I've never done this before, so turn on screen share. Entire screen. And share. Let me know when you guys can see this.
Okay, I can. Can you enlarge your screen?
What I can do is I can do this. Can you? Is that better? Can you see that?
Yep. Can you minimize the chat though, so that because there
Okay,
we go.
how's that?
Perfect.
Cool. It's about the noise in the background. I've got the dog with me. He's a little bit unhappy. Okay, so in fact, I've still done the wrong thing. So let me do this. So what we have, this is a resource defined in HCL or HashiCorp configuration language. This is the curly bracelet that Matt was on about. So we have a keyword that says, here's a resource. In quotations, we have the Junos QFX. Now, this is a reference to a module, in which case it will be called something like, I think it's Terraform Provider. In fact, let me try and find this. This is all a bit live. Sorry, guys. Nothing like looking at something for real. CD documents.
So is HCL a thing all by itself, or is it just?
Yeah, it's a language dedicated to Terraform. So the documentation is actually really quite cool for HCL, and you can do some really powerful things. So a little bit like Ansible, you can go off and do some Ginger 2 type stuff, but you've got the ability to bring in data sources. So where in Ansible you'll have like your host vars or your global vars directory. With HCL, you can go off and bring external data sources, and so you can run a script to get data to build some data sources. It's really comprehensive and really well thought out. And with the latest version of HCL as well, they've improved things like loop logic as well, which was a little bit missing previously, but it's really improving. Sorry, I'm just going to try and find sourcegim.com. Let's go for Junos Terraform. Right, okay. QFX. Right, what we have here in front of you is some of the files. So these are some of the Go source files. I'm not going to show you any of those. There's no point. But for instance, what we could do is go to the examples directory and okay, message is going up. So this is the file name of the provider. So you see this Terraform provider -Junos QFX. So then what happens in the actual HCL defined resources, you see Junos QFX. Well, that's the provider name. And then we have the kind of resource that the provider is going to create, which is VLAN access port. Then we have a name. Now, this name, it isn't programmatically significant. It's only significant to this actual HCL blob of configuration. And what we can use that to pull in variables from other, to pull in information, using it as variable for the things. So I've got a resource name, which is programmatically significant, and I'll go into details of why that is. And then we've got the actual kind of primitive information that we're interested in. So we've got the port number, we've got a description, and you can see here I'm doing some variable interpolation. And the idea is that that'll be replaced with the VLAN number that comes out of the VLAN resource. So if I go off to VLAN and go, well, it's got a name VLAN 442 XYZ, and it's got a VLAN name VLAN 442. So if I go here, VLAN 442 XYZ, that name is basically this one, but in the VLAN resource, which is significant to the resource, but not significant to the actual implementation of the kind of module, which took me some figuring out to try and get my head around that. These kind of things are split, and they're not related to each other necessarily. But this is a little bit of HCL. And now this is an implicit reference as well here. So this is used in the way that Terraform builds a graph. So it will say, okay, well, I probably need to build the VLAN before I go and do the access port. Now, there is a keyword that you can actually use that says depends on. So I could actually go down here and go something like, oops, how come is it you can never type when you're streaming live? It's depends on, and then you could do the same kind of thing. You could go off and call a variable out there, which would create an explicit dependency instead of an implicit dependency. So if you don't really want to kind of mess around with the mess of variables, that's one of the way to do things. And Terraform builds a plan from that. And it's some people, and having worked with Terraform now for quite a bit, I kind of use other tools and get frustrated at the lack of visibility and how things are going to run. You only ever see things where kind of just in time, or when execution, or when you instantiate. But with Terraform, you can build a graph and you can say, well, actually, I want to know what my plan looks like, or I want to know what my apply looks like, or I want to know what my destroy looks like. And actually, you can graph these things. And I think that is really, really cool. So what I could do is I could do a Terraform init. This might not work, by the way. I've not done anything with this for a while. Terraform plan, and what we might have, yeah. So the reason for that is the device is unreachable at the moment. Anyway, that's not necessarily a problem. There are ways of seeing this soon, hopefully on the NRE labs. But the idea is you can do a plan. And then you can see either a vector output or a PNG of the actual plan that Terraform's going to run through. So you end up being able to actually see what Terraform sees and then kind of use your own logic to figure out if it's the right thing to do. So Terraform's pretty cool. It's cool in so many ways. And also, that's not even getting onto the concept of like back end. So you can store a lot of these things in console. We said earlier on that you store like a local version of state, and if you destroy that state, then you have a significant problem. But the idea is, I've done the wrong thing here. Sorry guys, I am really bad at this stuff.
Worries.
I've never done this before, so yeah, forgive me on that one. So you can store Terraform information on a different set of backends. It doesn't have to be in your own file server or on your local machine. And the idea is then, especially something like console, is really quite powerful for an organization, and you can deal with high level concepts like locking as well. I could go on for hours about this stuff. Terraform has just kind of really changed the way I think about life.
So so you created some Junos modules, or were there Junos modules out there for Terraform?
No, I created them. And we're not quite at an alpha release yet. I'm still thinking about the logical way that these things should work. So what happens in order to treat Junos kind of, I guess, mutably or immutably, Terraform actually builds out configuration groups on top of Junos. So the idea then, we create a VLAN, we actually create a configuration group, which is then applied to Junos, and then the configuration tree is rebuilt after a commit. And that way as well, we can change the contents of those configuration groups, and providing that the resource name hasn't changed, Terraform can still blow them away at a later date about them. So where engineers go off. So if we take an Ansible approach and say we've built a template, we've put some variables in, and then later down the line, somebody comes along and manually changes those things. There's no way. I mean, Ansible's just a dumb interface for something else. There's no way it's going to pull that information back and remove, the horrors of an engineer. But with Terraform, because of the way it's been based in groups, it can just blow the group away. So everything's like self-contained in its own stanza. That's the way we've done it. I'm going to make a few minor changes. At the minute, they're global configuration groups, but I'm going to be applying them now at the actual resource level. So VLANs will get put into the VLAN level, then interfaces into the interface level. Because at the minute, it's all global. But then going back to something I kind of touched on earlier on is, how do you know when something's done, or how does Terraform know that a resource is free to use? So let's talk about ports. Some people say, well, the port had a description that said parking or free or something. Well, that means now you've got a workflow before your workflow in order to prepare the device for automation. And one of the things I wanted to do was have Terraform almost populate all interfaces with a generic description field. And you can do that through a configuration group. But then the problem was there's an order of inheritance that has to happen. So what I've kind of gone now is I've said, well, I think what needs to happen is all of the kind of the prep work needs to be in the global space, and then all of the doing has to go into the correct stanza, so the inheritance works properly within Junos itself. And this will be a nightmare, I think, in any other operating system other than Junos. It's just Junos is really well structured for this kind of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like. So, what did you have to do as far as like committing goes? I know when I worked with Puppet in the past in networking, we wrote Junos. Jeremy Shulman and I wrote Junos modules for Puppet. This is going back a little ways. And these tools are generally not meant for a device in which you open a session, make a bunch of changes, and then commit. Like they're more designed for like, hey, I'm gonna go and just do this, right? And then the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and there's no overall session that's open at the end and closed and committed and closed, or sorry, opened at the beginning and then committed and closed at the end. Was there any sort of special hackery you had to do for that?
That's a good question. I'm still not 100% happy with it. So I think one of my what I do at the moment is in the main configuration there's netconf information. So we say we've got a port, we've got an account, an SSH key, or we can just do plain text, whatever. And one socket is created, but it's the handlers are reused. And I need to go back to this because one of the things I wanted to do was create a Go routine in the background, which basically receive stuff. And the idea is maybe I could do one candidate change and then commit the whole thing. But then you've got to, because Terraform builds a graph to try and figure out, am I the last one, was a real hard challenge at the time, which I didn't want to have. So right now what happens is every resource is a change and a commit. Damn it, dog. Every resource is a change and a commit on Junos. In fact, I could probably open that code and just kind of have a look at that, but it's been a while since I've touched it.
Well, it's funny because like it sounds like you're having to deal with this trade off of like making things happen in a safe way. Like you want to respect the natural like interdependency of config snippets within Junos, but by doing that, like you have to commit pretty much every time you make a change, and of course that's going to like add potentially minutes to a change in Junos, right? Yeah. Depending on the device and how big its config is.
Absolutely, and this is another reason why I need to some of the configuration items from the global stanza down to the actual kind of feature stanza, because it reduces that kind of global tree rebuild. And I think it's been quite nice because Juniper engineering has been really supportive of this, and it's invoked a lot of conversation around how kind of configurations are managed internally and how the trees are built. So it's been a real challenge to even get this far. But even now, having used it a little bit and thought about it, there are optimizations. There are clean changes I need to make to try and get the best out of this. I'm just looking at code actually right now. I'm trying to figure out. I can't remember where I do the commits. If I can find it, I'll show you. Obviously, doing these things live is always a nightmare because you know what'll happen. The second you give up, you'll find it.
It would be, just as a side note, it would be really cool if like we as in Juniper, putting the Juniper hat on a little bit, have a lot of open source out there, and to say that it comes with varying levels of support is kind of an understatement. Like we have PyZ is our Python library. Like that's about as well supported in terms of open source products you're going to get from Juniper. Like we build so much on top of PyZ. Like everybody in Juniper knows about it that does anything with respect to automation. Versus like an OpenMTI, which is more or less, my understanding is that project is more or less dead. So you're gonna encounter varying levels of support. It would be kind of cool if like the Terraform provider was like the new PyZ. You know what I mean? Like it like. Yeah. Obviously, we'll continue to support PyZ, I would imagine, but just to have a declarative option that sort of sits alongside that would be, I think that would be pretty cool. As a prosumer officially supported kind of thing.
Yeah, I got you. So I think update raw config. Yeah, I'm code diving now, which is never a good thing. Commit string. Where are we? Delete config. Update configs. So what I've kind of done, I've almost reached parity between updating configurations and deleting configurations, and the commit is implicit to some of those calls. So I'll send a raw blob of config. So yeah, so what I do is I do some locking on the data store, and that's just a secondary lock to make sure if anybody else invokes stuff through Terraform that it's not going to crap all over itself. The socket's opened up and a dial happens that I send the raw. So I actually form XML in the background. So I've got a load of data structures which are serialized into XML. There is no sidechain checking with YAML here. What I tend to do is I try and match up the version to the version of Junos, and the data structures come straight off the devices themselves, so they're one-to-one in terms of parity. Send the raw XML. Then I also send a commit, and I close a driver, unlock the kind of running data store, and then return from the function which calls out to to Junos, and I couldn't really find a cleaner way of doing that. And that might be just down to me not being overly familiar with Terraform at the time. But everything with Terraform feels very flowy. And what I didn't want to do is assume that I could hold like a go routine open in one of the invocations of a provider to make one candidate change. It just wasn't going to happen. It's not the way that Terraform works. So with every call, and this is why the graphing is so important. It's not like with Ansible, you have to create the template and then commit the whole thing. With Terraform, you can make these kind of microtransactions, and Terraform takes care of the ordering. And okay, on a large device, some of the commit times can be fairly high. I mean, I've gone from anywhere from handfuls of seconds to like 30, 40 seconds on some larger devices. But then maybe at some point we'll find a different way of doing that. And one of the ideas I had at some point, and this is not even out in general availability yet, was what if we could actually do Terraform for ephemeral configuration?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So we do Terraform to gRPC binding and manage that. I mean, then we wouldn't have the commit problem, right? But then obviously you give the world a nuke. You kind of say, hey, you want to go mess things up? Here's some Terraform providers, and it's like, I don't know how I feel about that one. Feels a bit dangerous.
So this is cool. And is any of this out on GitHub yet, or?
Not yet. So many people want this, but I'm absolutely terrified of this going wrong because I don't feel like I've solved all the challenges yet. And even now, this week, I've kind of gone, I need to move the tree around a little bit to try and reach this optimization. So I'm hoping by the end of this month, we'll have some kind of trusted people we can go to and say, okay, now we're ready for use. In terms of ordering, it will be QFX resources first. Then more than likely MX extensions for things like managing BGP sessions and L3 VPNs, and then SRX. And obviously, with the security aspect, there is a crap ton of modules that need to be built, and also data structures as well. But I don't want to build these things by hand. So I'm actually right now building a tooling pipeline which builds all the resources automatically. So the idea is I feed in some XML, the data structures are spat out, and then I'll have to do very, very minimal wiring up, which means then the rate of development can be much faster. So some of these at the minute have all been hand wove, but I've been playing around with data structure generators, which is going really quite well. I also played around with Go testing as well to make sure that I wasn't doing anything stupid in terms of delaying the actual processing time. So everything's fairly researched to this point, but it's going to come out soon. I think end of this month we'll have the first kind of trusted people to run with this.
Yeah, there is an XSD. There's like a schema for each version of Junos that has all the stuff defined in it. Is that something you're looking at?
No, that's it's an egg I don't really want to smash at the moment. So what I'm doing is I'm fairly tactical. So if think about high touch environments, what are our customers touching the most? Some things you configure once and walk away. Some things you're always doing. It's the little things that kind of, if you envisage configuration as like a pyramid, what's at the wide chunk at the bottom? What are all those toil bits? So I'm starting there. And the idea is for every task that somebody wants to do, I'll create an example, spit the XML out right down at that object layer instead of the whole thing. Because I think we could spend, I could spend a long time trying to model the whole of Junos to create those resources. And I think it would be a never-ending task. I probably need a team of people to do that. And that's probably me talking from a lack of, I don't know, experience on that kind of scale. But it certainly feels that way at the moment.
Nice.
Bit of a challenge.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'd like to get my hands on and play with it. I'm actually using Ansible now to get VSRX spun up in AWS, and I've been told by everyone that Terraform would be a much better way to do that, to spin it up and get it configured. So if I'm looking forward to it.
Well, in that case, then do me a favor, Eric. Collect kind of like config snippets or configlets or whatever that you're using, and I'll try and get the cloudy stuff ready first so you can do that. That'd be cool.
Nice. So
they'll put you on a short list.
Yeah, sorry. Short list.
Short list. Yeah.
Well, the short list right now is Cloud Field Day. I'm that's on my short list right now, and I have like various stress meters, and my Cloud Field Day stress meters going up because it's coming next week, and I got to make sure that goes smooth. It's Juniper's first Cloud Field Day, so
Good luck.
You can tell by like if Toad gets like a haircut and the beard is like nice and prim and proper, like you can tell he's starting to feel the heat.
Well, it's if I get my fingers and kind of line them up with his beard, I'll check the angle of cut. Yeah, that's a level of stress right there. That's
It's like a little.
good angles
It's a
going on.
stress meter.
Yeah.
So David, if we wanted to like obviously if you wanted to like look at the code, that's a whole other different discussion. But like, what if I just wanted to like play with it, like see what the Terraform and Junos hubbub is all about? Is there a resource out there that might be useful?
Hang on. I'm just gonna do my fishing impression. Okay. Yeah, of course. So I think this is probably the coolest thing, and this has changed the way about everything. We've got an NRE lab for this. We've got a lesson coming up. So lesson 31 is a Terraform lesson. So when this is published, anybody can spool one of these environments up within 20 seconds. There's a 5-part lesson where you can learn all the basics of Terraform. You can invoke, you can do the inits, you can do a plan. You also have one of the stages in the lessons is to change the contents of one of the resources in HCL. And you can actually, once you've gone through the basic lessons, it's free flow. You can play around, change anything you want. Now, I've been fairly risk averse with this. I've not put any documentation for whatever else may be in the module at the moment. It's what you see is kind of what you get in terms of the modules. But what we do is we take the normal NRE labs triangle of QFXs and then create some basic resources on VQFX1, I think it is, to finish off some of the configuration and then do some testing. And then it's also, I think it exercises a graph part as well, which is probably one of my favorite parts, and you get to blow it all away and destroy it at the end. So that's coming out whenever you push a button, Matt.
Yes, and a quick update on that. So David's Terraform lesson is merged. It's all part of the master branch of the curriculum. So it will absolutely get in the next release, obviously, because it's in master. We are currently working on some image-related things. There are 2 other lessons that we're hoping to be part of this release. One of which is on OpenConfig, and the other one is on the Junos SDK, which is Jet. Both of which require a version of Junos that's like a little bit more full-featured than the image that we have been using traditionally and the image that the Terraform lesson uses. So we are currently ironing out some wrinkles on that one. It's moving along. We're hoping to have the next version released sometime this week. That's the goal. If not, then very early next week. But very soon. We're just really waiting on this image stuff to get worked out, and we're working on it all the time. So as a quick status update.
Nice. I can't wait for this to come out. In all honesty.
And no, it's awesome. And I remember when I saw so you and I started talking about this lesson when we were in Vegas together. Yeah. We were at one of Juniper's sales kickoffs. And then I believe it was a week or 2 later, I saw the PR come in, and I saw that you'd written he wrote 5 labs for this lesson. So in the drop down that you can see on NRE on an NRE Labs lesson, you can see there's a drop down for different chapters or labs, and he wrote 5. So this isn't just some here's Terraform, run Terraform in it, and see that's kind of cool. There's some green text, blah blah blah. No, this is legit. This is a 5 lab out of the gate dealio. And obviously as we continue to add, as David continues to add features to the module, I would assume, or the provider. I would assume we'll be updating the lesson, but 5 out of the gate, that's awesome. That's a ton of content right off the gate.
I mean, just to show a sign of commitment as well, I actually wrote more functionality provided for this because BGP wasn't there, and I was like, oh damn, the lesson's not going to be complete without this. So I ended up night, literally coffee after coffee, kind of, I'm going to finish this, I'm going to push this code, and then it was kind of cool to see it work. It was neat.
So what you're telling me is you drank a lot of coffee and then real quick wrote some code to get some features in last minute because you just absolutely had to do it, and you sacrifice sleep to see. I just don't identify with that. I don't know what that's about. I have nothing to say that relates to that at all.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah. Oh man, that is that's a point of discussion in our relationship, Matt and I. Matt, how's it going? Oh, I was up till 3 a.m. doing what? Implementing this thing you've never heard about that I've been thinking about. Just a small change, couple thousand lines of code. Changed every single file in the repository, to make it work. Oh, that's good, Matt. That's
Hey, at least I changed the curriculum when I
at
do that. It
least
would be
you
totally
opened a
different.
PR when the sun went down. You opened a P or an issue. You opened an issue when the sun went down, and then you had to resolve by the time the sun came up. That's
Yeah.
We should put like a +1 on the issues before anybody's allowed to do anything. Maybe even do that. Do a +1 on the
No.
issues before they're even published. There you go. That'd control a little
Well,
mouse.
okay, fine, but
I
I'm
was going to
exempt
call you
from
a
that.
rat,
I get
but
to do whatever I want.
little gerbil.
nice. So,
Yeah,
Matt, do you think that'll be done next week or this week or what?
Again, the target for the next release, which again, David's lesson is already merged. It's already live on our PTR site, so like that's done deal. Next release, his lesson's going to be in it. The only thing we're working on right now is there are 2 other lessons which are totally reviewed. They're not merged yet because we're making sure that the image that we're trying to work on a VQFX, a full VQFX image. It's pretty beefy actually. Is ready to go for those lessons, and then once that is done, all of those will get merged, and we'll just kick off the release workflow just like that.
Nice.
So yeah, the target for all of that to happen is sometime this week. And honestly, if it doesn't happen in the next like 2 or 3 days, then it probably won't be because I'm traveling at the end of the week. So that's all I'm going to be working on in the next few days. Is trying to get that working. So target is end of the week. But worst case scenario, early next week.
I don't know if anybody's sorry to drag you away from this, guys. I know a huge amount of work goes into this. I mean, I can see that, but one of the things NRE Labs has done is made me kind of hate blogging.
Blogging?
You've made me hate things. And the reason is once you start building content and taking somebody on a journey through actual stuff that you can feel and see, your own stuff just feels crap. Your own platform feels like you're just missing something. And I can't describe it. It's completely changed the way I'm approaching things now. I can't describe it. It's completely rewired my brain. It's like now I want a mini NRE. I can't describe it. It's changed things.
Yeah, what I like about NRE Labs, I've written a lot of blog posts as well, and I look especially ones that are more that are speaking about technical things. I've done a bunch of those, and I go back and I look at them and I think, man, if only we had NRE Labs. Oh my God, sorry. I don't know why I'm yawning. I slept for like 10 hours last night. But if only we had NRE Labs, right? We could.
It was so funny though. The timing of that was really good. Like you threw up your hands. You were getting ready to like nail this huge point.
Yeah, I know. And then it just hit me.
And then you were just like, yeah.
All morning, dude. It's been like that. I slept. I had coffee and everything. Like I am jazzed up, and I don't know if it's like. I'm
so excited.
Yeah, I'm not tired though. It's
probably
like
you got that
something.
thick ass shirt on, man. Like you got to go outside in that crisp Wisconsin air and
yeah. Oh, it's cold in my basement. That's why I have this flannel on. It's very cold down. It's 59 degrees in my basement. So I have like a sweater on underneath this.
That's American degrees, David. Yeah. That's American.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a similar thing going on here, right? I've got my whatever that is on one of them because it's a little bit chilly.
Indeed. I don't even. What was I saying before I yawned?
Oh, how excited and awesome the NRE Labs.
Oh yeah, I think, man, like there should be. If I could make every one of my technical blogs have some tangible demonstration of what I'm talking about. That's just the way it ought to be done. I mean, it's that way. You don't just have to read about it. You can immediately log into a device and look at a config, or run a ping command, or look at the state of some protocol, and you can just immediately get a tangible sense of what it looks like on the command line, right? Which is for a lot of engineers, that's what paints the picture. So
I don't want to spoil too much because this doesn't exist yet and we're still planning it. But Derek and I were talking last week with we'll call them a third party, a very important third party that if this conversation pans out, it'll mean very, very many good things for NRE Labs. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, or at least was talked about after that conversation, was the idea of being able to use NRE Labs as the backend, but share a lesson in the same way that you share like a YouTube video. So you can share a YouTube video by just sending the link, right? Same thing applies to an NRE Labs lesson.
That'd be amazing.
But with YouTube videos, you can also share via embed. So you can say, like, I'd like to share this and embed it in another page. So like if you're writing a blog post, like you don't necessarily want to just like link people to NRE Labs. You'd like to keep them in your site and have like a little widget there that has a self-contained lesson with the lesson guide in the little widget. That's not hard for us to do. That's like not hard for us to offer, because again, all that would be required is to move the lesson guide as effectively as a tab, and then have just the other tabs already there. And so if you can imagine, like in NRE Labs, if you go to a lesson that you really like and you want to embed it in your blog post, like your actual blog posts, like on your site, you can say share embed, and it'll highlight the text just like YouTube does. And then it'll have this widget in your blog post that's got like the, if you have 3 devices, then it'll have 4 tabs: the lab guide, and then device 1, 2, and 3. And it's just in there, and all of the back end would still work exactly the same way. It would just be a slightly different presentation.
You guys totally have to do this, and so I'm going to commit some money right here, right? 60 British pence right there.
Oh,
okay.
The beginning
nice.
of this. I'll put it in a little Kickstarter campaign. You guys have to do this. It will be
60 pence.
Yeah. Hey,
wow.
Great things are built on first donations, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's
generous.
Probably 4 more. No, more than that. 6 more, 7 more of those. I can get an ale.
Do they still make you pay to go to the bathroom in public, like airports and train stations?
Only the larger ones. Yeah,
okay.
I think it's like 25 pence now down at Euston, but it's.
Woo!
I wouldn't go.
It was like 10 pence when I was there in. When was I in the UK? It was like when I was 13. So like 2011, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there. I mean, I think you pay to come out with a virus. It's not good. Sneak into first is what you do. Go upstairs and run through the doors. We're back in a minute, and then run off with a cookie. That's what I do. I'm not condoning that, but it's a way to do it.
You patron the business. They're fine. They'll survive.
Yeah, you just pay them a nice compliment and run away. Cool.
All right, so it's actually been about an hour, and I don't know if we wanted to. What else do you want to cover, man? Anything else?
I just wanted to. I did a little light agenda there. We covered Terraform, obviously. Any other resources, David, you want to point people to with respect to the NRE meetup? Is there a link you want to share?
Yeah, I can certainly share that. How do you want me to share it, by the way? Because like I say, you probably discovered I'm a
just send Matt a message, and then when we're gonna export this to YouTube, and we'll put it in the description on YouTube.
Oh, cool. Okay, I'll absolutely do that. I've got a question for you, actually, Matt. So with regards to the SDK content, so the Jet stuff,
yes,
are you at liberty to share anything that's going to come out with that? That's something that I'm.
Yeah, well, I should mention, as with everything, I mean, this is one of the things that's very, very important to me, and all of us involved with the project, is that everything's totally above board. There's no there's no preparing things in a back freaking meeting room and then being like, bah, here's the content. So everything is done in the open, and so the Jet lesson and the open config lesson both are currently they're currently in unmerged open pull requests on the Antidote project. So you can take a peek there at any time, and they're there. They're not merged yet because, like I said, we're trying to figure out some of the image stuff, but a lot of the content is up to date. They've both been through a full review cycle, so they're basically ready to merge as long as the image stuff gets worked out. So the content's done. It just needs to get the image work, and then we merge it.
I'm going to drop a little fishy right here, actually. So I did some work on Jet probably about a year ago now, where one of our customers wanted to see a Prometheus collector running on an MX. So I wrote a Prometheus collector, kind of butchered it together in Go, and actually got it running on an MX. So I did a whole demo around that. And then I built a toolchain to take basically a Go binary and then package it for Junos and then publish. All you need is a developer key. And what I'm thinking about doing, if I can get permission to open source that, then I might come back with another lesson at some point in terms of a mini how-to around Jet.
Oh, I remember you doing this because we were talking about maybe packaging a Todd agent binary and putting that into Junos. Yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah, especially if you could make that a repeatable thing. So basically, I think you did this actually, where somebody says hey, I have a Go project and I want to run it on Junos. How do I do that?
Yeah. Oh, it exists. Yeah,
through the whole
it does.
process.
It totally exists. I can't, for legal reasons, open yet, but I'm totally planning on trying to. I'm going to work with the whole process and just get that done, because I worked for quite an amount of time to get that thing built. I think it's pretty cool actually, because most of the time engineers will say you can take C, C++, and Python and package that. You can packagize it and put it onto Junos. Technically, it's anything that will run on FreeBSD. It's just the way that the build environment works with Jet. I know this isn't necessarily about Jet, but Jet's quite an interesting thing. We can do some really, really cool stuff with that.
Sure. Yeah,
Does it run
and
on
of course,
BMX, by the way?
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
does.
sure.
You should
Mm-hmm.
come back on this very stream and demo this. I haven't seen it. It sounds amazing.
Okay. Cool.
yeah, when we were talking about this, yeah, again, like over a year ago, originally, and I, as you know, one of my currently old projects that I'm trying to revive and rebuild is Todd, the whole distributed testing thing. Um, and one of the things that I have so consistently been asked for that project is like, hey, this is cool, but like I'm not on the server team and they don't let us spin up servers, and I'm like, that sucks. But what they want to do is run these, like, the network engineers want to run tools like this, but they don't have servers. They got their switches. And so if we can run these tools as small as they are just on a router or on a switch, like that makes a world of difference. And so this is very interesting to me, especially if you're talking about a language like Go, which you can cross compile very, very easily to different architectures from any source machine. Like I do this for Syringe, which what powers NRE Labs. I compile for like Windows and Darwin and Linux, just all from one machine. And so you combine these things together, and you've got a really powerful way to bring a lot of these new-ish tools into the world of where network engineers can like actually put them into production. You know, I think that's powerful.
Oh, it's super cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks guys for having me. I've enjoyed this. This has been cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we owe you a sticker or a shirt now for being a contributor. So send me some information and I'll get that shipped.
Awesome. Will do. I look forward to having that.
All right.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, cool. So I think we'll wrap it up then, and next week I think we'll cover maybe in a little more detail some of the like we usually do every time, issues and stuff like that, PRs that are open, and just have a look at what's going on in the project, that way. But I think we've used up a bit of our time this, and plus I want to eat lunch before my next call because I'm very hungry. So
And tired, apparently.
thank you, David, for coming on. And by the way, you can follow David on Twitter, which I don't have open. At was it at underscore IP engineer?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
Spot on. Yeah, well done.
So please do, and he'll be the first to let everyone know when the Terraform stuff goes public. And and we'll announce when his lessons are live on the NRE Labs website, as Matt said, sometime this week, hopefully. If something goes horribly wrong, then early next week. But we'll just follow at NRE Labs on Twitter, and you'll know when it's ready. So I'm at Cloud Toad, and Matt Oswalt is at Mirrodin, Mierdin, and thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye bye.